As the sun sets over this Renaissance-era Italian valley, the landscape is plunged into a dim, flat light. The high contrast of the day gives way to a muted, pervasive gray. This atmosphere is the setting for Robert Browning's poem, Andrea del Sarto. The historical Andrea was universally recognized as the faultless painter. Yet in Browning's text, we find a man paralyzed by his own technical perfection. To understand how flawless execution results in artistic failure, we need to examine the specific ways Browning maps Andrea's decline. His work provides the evidence. We see perfect anatomical balance and flawless drapery in the central figures, demonstrating total, uninterrupted mastery of his medium. Browning uses this physical setting as an objective correlative. The common grayness of the evening direct mirrors Andrea's internal spiritual and artistic decay. Andrea himself acknowledges this state. He admits that his youth, his hope, and his art have all been toned down to this muted, passionless level. This palette shift tracks his movement from the peak of his career at the French court of Fontainebleau, defined by vibrant golds and reds, to the flat, monochromatic silvers of his current life in Florence. The physical scale of Fontainebleau reflects his lost potential. The expansive architecture and open geometry represent the environment of creative freedom he left behind. Andrea's technical mastery, once severed from any higher aspiration, functions as a closed loop. Within these gray walls, his art is finished before it even begins. We can see the edges of this loop by looking strictly at the mechanical execution of his craft. In lines 59 through 63, Andrea details the tragedy of his own ease. He effortlessly achieves the exact technical results other artists spend their entire lives agonizing to reach. This diagram illustrates his low-pulsed craftsmanship. A perfectly straight vector line is drawn and instantly capped by rigid brackets. Creating art without struggle removes vital energy. In contrast, the erratic, jagged lines of lesser draftsmen constantly push against limitations, forcing boundaries to expand. Because Andrea requires no preliminary sketches or studies, his art contains no process of discovery. He has replaced exploration with the direct, efficient execution of a finished product. We can observe this mechanical precision in his draftsmanship. Notice the uniform, highly calculated shading lines on the neck and cheek. There are no searching pencil marks here. This efficiency violates a core Renaissance ideal. Greatness requires human struggle pressing against a divine standard. Andrea completely bypasses this human struggle entirely. Because he can perfectly execute everything he attempts, he is never forced to expand his conceptual boundaries. His absolute flawlessness has become his primary prison. That confinement extends to the physical boundaries of his room, tethered to his wife, Lucrezia. Lucrezia operates as the embodiment of material determinism. She anchors him to physical reality, preventing any movement towards spiritual ambition. He obsesses over her physical form as a flawless, geometric boundary. Observe the perfect oval of her face and the rigid framing of her headpiece. Their marriage is defined by a transaction. He trades his divine potential for her physical presence and affection. The text provides the financial terms of this trade. Andrea paints soulless, rapid works, specifically to pay off Lucrezia's cousin's gaming debts. In lines 125 through 131, Andrea offers a hypothetical excuse. He claims that if Lucrezia had brought a mind to urge him toward glory, he might have rivaled the great masters. But the facts of his life suggest otherwise. Andrea continuously chooses the immediate material reward of her smile over the deferred, intangible reward of historical greatness. King Francis I represents the spiritual and artistic freedom Andrea rejected. The heavy gold chain and royal patronage were his, yet he fled to Florence. Andrea uses Lucrezia and the pressure of debt as defensive boundaries. They offer him a reason to stay within his limits, rather than facing the vulnerability of true ambition. We place Andrea against the Renaissance trinity, Michelangelo, Leonardo, and Rafael, to see the cost of that defense. Rafael serves as the ultimate foil. He is an artist who possesses the exact divine spark that Andrea lacks. The poem anchors this in a specific anatomical critique. Looking at a copy of Raphael's work, Andrea observes an arm that is wrongly put in terms of strict proportion. This compares technical flaw and spiritual stretch. Left, Andrea's standard, a perfectly rigid anatomical wireframe. Right, the elongated, distorted geometry of Raphael's execution. That distortion evidences the insight and stretch required to reach beyond human limits. The perfect left wireframe remains dark and static. Andrea admits he could easily correct the mechanical geometry of Raphael's line, but doing so would erase the soul of the figure. He attributes Raphael's reach to his sudden blood, a visceral, emotional ambition that elevates flawed drafts into undeniable masterpieces. This creates the poem's irony. The technical execution of the master's works may drop groundward, but the fierce ambition behind those flaws ensures the men themselves reach heaven. A technically perfect piece is merely a finite object. A striving, flawed piece is an infinite vehicle for the artist's soul. We leave the comparison with the masters and return to the reality of Andrea's current space. Outside his window lies the distant city, a vast, open space representing the infinite potential of a world he has locked himself away from. Looking out at that space, Browning delivers his climactic thesis. The exact definition of the human soul is the capacity to strive for the impossible. But a man's reach should exceed his grasp, or what's a heaven for? This is the philosophy of the aspirational gap. Heaven is not a reward for perfection. It is the necessary, infinite space left for the things we cannot yet achieve. Confronted with this truth, Andrea makes his final choice. He accepts his limitations, settling in to paint out the gray remainder of the evening. When your grasp perfectly equals your reach, you have constructed a closed system. No growth can occur within it. The slow fading of Andrea's talent is a deliberate, quiet surrender to the perfectly constructed, inescapable four walls